It's little incremental steps that allow us to persist. And as one of our former presidents, Coolidge, said, persistence and consistency are omnipotent. So let's say you have a purpose, you have all that clarity. If you aren't taking persistent and consistent action, going to the gym and a little bit increase, we have to have micro tears of the muscle to build strength. You keep doing the same weight, the same reps, and the same duration, you're not going to build muscle. You might maintain it, but it probably will atrophy. We have to have micro tears. A little bit of discomfort, a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of discomfort is what grows our comfort zone. So diving into a podcast in 2018 and being like, I'm all in, is kind of like going to the gym and saying, I'm going to work out 1 day a week, 4 hours lifting 400 kilos. No, you're not going to get results and you're just going to be exhausted and hurt.
Welcome to They're Not Like Us, the podcast where bold ideas and inspiring stories come to life. I'm your host, Aaron, here to challenge the norms and ignite your potential. If you're ready to level up, don't forget to subscribe and join the movement. Now, let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to They're Not Like Us. I'm your host, Aaron, and today I'm joined by Chad Cooper. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Good day, depending on what time of day it is that people are tuning into. So we're going to be safe.
Of that. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, Chad?
Absolutely, Aaron. Thank you. My background has really been one of being very appropriate to the title of your show. I am not like most other people. So when I was very young, grew up with a very large family, and I was one of the youngest. And so you have to fight, you have to take a stand for being able to be seen. And so my personality, I would say, is kind of been shaped as all people are in their childhood. Went into the Marine Corps, United States Marine Corps, and that was a shock to my family because they went, this one's a mama's boy. Well, it shaped me into becoming a man, and it was a major character building position. Fortunately for me, I've always been very athletic. I was offered a tryout on the United States ski team, and I went into the Marine Corps instead, but I've been very athletic, and that's been a key piece to my career, to my personal life, to my spiritual life, etc. So in the Marine Corps was excelled in terms of performing, in terms of delivering, got out, went to university, did well in university, got out, went into the career world and retired from Microsoft when I was 35. So I don't follow the norm in terms of trends, and I compressed time. So that allowed me then to be the primary for my son and be the pioneering at the time. It was unheard of the father being the caretaker while the mother went off and continued to pursue her career. Elected official for a decade, so I understand politics. I understand what it takes to be elected versus appointed. Worked on several boards, worked at the corporate, at the entrepreneurial level, and at the personal level. And that allowed me to become a licensed professional coach, where I specialize with billionaires, professional athletes, Olympians, and everyday entrepreneurs looking to be high performers. So fast forward that allowed me then, as my son moved off to university and became an empty nester, to really I had a moment with God, shall we say, universe, whatever you want to call it, Aaron. And that was, okay, I need you to take all of these gifts. I need you to take all these learned talents and apply them through my foundation, which I've had for 20 years. And I want you to go out and serve people in volume, in particular, developing parts of the world. So now what I'm doing is taking those traits, those secret ingredients, and being able to deliver it at a price affordable way that, the reality is most people can't afford these high ticket sales and products. So it's getting the word out, getting the message out without being the composer or author of those tips and tricks.
Yeah, there's a lot of high ticket stuff out there, so it's actually
there's a lot
good
of high
to see
crap out there, Aaron.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest.
I mean, yeah, to be honest, and I think I've bought most of it, if I'm quite honest with you. I've tried a lot of stuff online myself. You always end up, I say always, that's not fair, but majority of the time I would say you end up disappointed, because I think there's probably, some very good people out there, but how do you know who's who?
That's
Because
part of the trick. right? Is
Yeah.
we tend to look at that model, and that model is accurate and it's true. But we also can look at it from the perspective of, if I'm investing in this, it's not an expense, it's an investment. If I get a 5% return, think about that. If you put that into an account, you'd go, okay, that's a fair and honest return. So we can also see the good in that content. And often when we invest at that level, we expect a monumental return. But if we are persistent and consistent in that continual education, it will bring back a return that over time creates a trajectory of success and a handsome result. So I do look at, there's a lot of crap, but if we can find, crap is great fertilizer to grow beautiful things. And it's really about us being able to extract the beautiful things out of it and be able to leverage those. So, I will say I see both sides of the situation, and I look for what can I do with this to grow beautiful things.
I think from my experience, Chad, right, that the ones I've done and the ones that kind of I've got me to purchase, I find the best coaches or the best people offering any kind of training program or education out there are not always the best marketers, and it's the best marketers that drag in the most people. And unfortunately, when their product and their back end's not very good, it leaves people with a sour taste in the mouth, and then ultimately gets a bad rep for the entire industry if you get two or three of those on the bounce.
Yeah, I mean, we can see that trend holds true across several industries and spectrums. When we look at the faith based community, surprisingly, most people don't realize, but I think it's like 85% of mega church pastors, ministers, right? The televangelists, like 85% of them do not have a degree in seminary. They have a degree in marketing and in business. Okay. So if we look at that and most people don't realize that, then I would agree that your analysis and your understanding is pretty spot on. We also can look at that and say, Top Gun Maverick, everybody saw the movie. Well, we need to understand as business owners that when I wrote my first book, it was the effort, the time, and the money that I had to pour into writing the book. No one told me that that's a small piece to the marketing aspect. And when you look at Top Gun Maverick, the cost of what it took to produce was millions of dollars to film, produce, edit, and get a blockbuster movie completed. That was a fraction, and Tom Cruise was wise enough to know, in order for it to be a blockbuster hit, he needed to put it on the shelf for 2 years. It sat on the shelf and they did not release or start marketing. Well, they did market it for 2 years because they knew with COVID they had to be able to get it into the movie theaters. So understanding our gifts and our content. Second is being able to make that content relevant or in a context that people can consume and understand. And then both of those have very little to do with the understanding of running a business as a business, not as a hobby. And that requires expertise and precision in marketing. So the two of them have to do this. And most of them understand, well, I'm just really passionate, Aaron. And then they neglect the responsibility of this.
Yeah, and it's two very, very different skill sets, and they're both are equally difficult to master and get right. I would argue. So I get why people, especially if people are starting, for instance, if somebody's in full-time employment, but this is their passion, they're trying to pursue it on the side. There's a lot of effort then that goes into not only doing the coaching side of it, but then actually trying to learn marketing and get that element right as well. Which if you don't enjoy it, probably makes it even more difficult, right?
Well, I would say that the industry of marketing has a lot of snake oil salesmen in it. And whether it's intentional or unintentional is really not the point. What we have a responsibility, if we're going to say, hey, I have a gift or I have a skill or talent that I know it can deliver powerfully. Great. With that, we need to take some of the ingredients. One of those is pain, right? It was probably a lot of uncomfortableness and pain to be able to refine and really get the precision of what that content is and the ability to relate it in multiple contexts of audiences. We also can take that and say, what is it that I'm talented as a businesspreneur, entrepreneur, whatever you want to call, solopreneur, whatever, and say, how do I apply those skill sets over to the marketing industry? The marketing industry is really good at selling you and presenting all kinds of activity. Well, that's kind of like an octopus on roller skates. There's a lot of movement, but not in any focused direction, and you end up bankrupt in no particular positive results. And so what we need to do is, like in how we run our practice and our business, is to be able to find a marketing company that has a skill set. And we can apply the old Russian proverb, trust but verify. Trust that Aaron recommended this marketing firm. We have a responsibility to verify that they actually can fulfill on that. And so what we have to do is have a conversation of, great, how is all of this activity that you're going to do going to deliver an outcome? And that's usually where people miss the ball, and why marketing is a miss for most is that they understand their product and they allow somebody to talk about all the activities around the outcomes that it produces, but they don't translate and say, here's how all that activity will deliver an outcome. So I hire people first based on character, then on skill set. So when we look at bringing in some marketing people, is I tell them straight up, I pay you for an outcome, not activity. So Aaron, I don't care if it takes you 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months. Here's the deadline. Articulate what the goal line and what a goal looks like, what the outcome is. And as long as it is morally responsible and fiscally and financially ethical, I am not concerned on the how. I'm concerned on the deliverable. And then that's where we're going to separate probably 9 out of 10 of the marketing firms, is their ability to articulate. Do you actually get what the deliverable is? Do you have a map on how to actually achieve that? That's what I'm hiring you for. And when we do that, then we're very likely to have the success. And as an entrepreneur, that's usually where we understand the hobbyist from the business person and their ability to have, let's just say, respectfully courageous conversations that allow them to understand, I'm paying you for an outcome and I make no apologies if you can't deliver because you. And how does that usually work? Well, but Aaron, I worked really hard. I did all of these things. Did you score the touchdown? Did you score the goal? Well, no. Then we failed. And people don't understand 99% is the same as 1%. You didn't score.
It's interesting, Chad, because as a consumer, you wouldn't accept that, would you? As a consumer, if they weren't delivering, you'd be wanting your money back, you'd be making complaints, there'd be all sorts of issues.
Without
But
question.
whereas when you're a business owner and you're trying to get an outcome and you're paying somebody for that service, why do you think there's that disconnect that people just kind of go, oh, okay, paid for you, didn't get what I wanted, but
Yeah, I
I'll
would say
carry on.
David R. Hawkins really articulates this in a way that people can understand quite well. And he has what's called the scale of consciousness, and it goes from 0 to 1,000. And from 199 to 0 is what he would say is force energy. And most of us, because of our indoctrinated beliefs or limiting belief system, we look at marketing from a force energy. I have to force my way to success. I have to force my way to an outcome. I have to take from here in order to create over here. And we don't want to label force energy as wrong or bad, but it does have to take from one place in order to deliver in another. Okay. And I would say when we're creating, so anything from 200 above to a 1 to 1,000 is generating an empowering energy. And that's where we are in our happy place. That's where we typically reside and live most of the time. So when there are things that we don't want to do, we drop down below 200 into force. And that can even be, that's where pride is. And so when we look at some religions, we look at scripture, pride cometh before the fall, is because that is right below 200. So 200 is the tipping point. 200 is also the equivalent of courage. It takes courage for us to have courageous conversations. But courage by itself at 200 doesn't care if you take your foot off the gas or put your foot on the accelerator. Courage requires you to make a decision and take action. What action you take is what's going to determine which energy you leverage. So if we have courage and go to willingness and inspiration and trust, that's an empowering and creating energy. That is probably where we sourced our content from as well. That's our foundation. But if we do it from fear, we do it from accepting what we get instead of getting what we accept, we're using force energy. And that's usually where we start going downhill. And so, what I would say with that is it requires courage. I learned this as an elected official for a decade is if you truly want to be an empowering servant leader, it takes courage to speak your truth through love. And so the mistake that often happens is we go, okay, I'm going to speak my truth. Well, it's probably riddled with judgment and aggression. Speaking your truth through love is encased with empathy and compassion. But don't mistake speaking your truth through love as having soft edges. It may still have a very sharp edge. But when we do it from empathy and compassion, it's on the other person whether they want to understand, whether they're coming up short, whether they have made a mistake, whether they have to make some tough decisions, but they don't feel judged. And so a lot of business people don't understand, look, you're going to have to step up and have a courageous conversation, but we can do that with gentleness. We can do that with respect. We can do that by asserting ourselves, removing the aggression.
Yeah, I think I can relate to a lot of that, Chad, and I think that's something I've been in leadership roles and stuff, and I've tried to do that always, and it's a difficult line to toe sometimes because sometimes you can, especially when you're learning how to do it, sometimes you can go too far one way or the other. Sometimes you can become too soft because you're trying too hard to not upset people and do it with an empathetic way, or sometimes you can over egg it and go the other way and be harsh because you're trying to push it the other way, and it's a skill that we have to learn, right?
Without question. And this is a really, really exciting time that I've never seen in over the 5 decades that I've been on this planet. And just in the last couple of years, look, I'm a marketing moron, right? But it's truly not my skill set and my talent. It's not my gift, right? But what has happened in the last couple of years is this thing that's come on the scene called AI. The artificial intelligence, I have it just really immersed through my entire platform. So I know my content is rich. I know I have the ability to put it in a context that's relatable, but I can be verbose. I can miss like hit the bullseye, and I can talk around things. I can use things like Opus to have my team go in and take this entire conversation, strip out the crap, the fluff, the nonsensical pieces, and add a B-roll and like deliver it in small bite-sized pieces. And even I sit back, Aaron, I'm like, I said that? That's actually really good. Right? So AI allows us to go in and go, take that piece, take that piece, take that piece. Well, we can also do that in our communication and learn what is healthy communication. So I have it in my email. Let's be honest, we can have a courageous conversation, but if we're triggered and we have somebody that we're struggling, we can write that email. We don't put anything in the to line in case it gets accidentally sent, right? But we can put it in and say, "Dear jerk, blah blah blah," and then say, make this empathetic and compassionate. And it does. And then we can go in and say, retain the directness, right? So we can go in and learn what is effective, healthy, empathetic, and compassionate communication. And then when it comes back and does that, you're like, that's exactly what I was trying to say. So in today's world, and of course, there's free versions of that, but it's no longer an excuse for us to say, I don't know how, oh, I'm not good at that, because it's able to, you can go to your library, you can go on, on your own computer, on your phone, whatever, and go, here's the explanation. Whether I apply it and I have enough maturity to refrain from the impulse and urge, and instead, like a nice wine, let it breathe and respond and ask for help, we can actually learn and go, I can do that next time. And we can actually up level our communication skills, which means that we can actually deliver the impact so that our content is absorbed and served.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I always used to before AI, I used to always write up my scathing emails and then just save them to drafts and then sleep on it. Always sleep on it before you send it.
You're like,
And then the next day you're like, oh, I need to tone that down.
yeah, exactly. And so this has allowed us to be able to have a personal advisor, to have a coach, to have a mentor, to have an expert that says, maybe you just want to tweak and change this around. Maybe, let's do this. And then it allows us to see the way through to actually score those goals.
Yeah, it's a magnificent tool, AI, and if it's used correctly and people learn how to use it properly, and it takes a little bit of playing with as well to kind of figure out,
That's
because
it's a
it's only as
really
good as the prompts you put in, right?
It's a great point, and that's the important thing, right? And so we have to be a master. We have to be an expert in our content, right? Because if we don't, we've seen the garbage that it will generate. This like fluff. What in the last U.S. Elections, they one of the candidates was calling the other one like word salad. I think is what it was, right? AI has no problem writing word salad, and if you know your content, you're an expert, you can tell when somebody doesn't know it because that content is just rhetoric. So there is a responsibility on our part as the source to be able to know our content, to be a master of that content, and then it can come in and polish that content. It can go in and give us examples that make it relevant. But we have to have the ownership and the understanding from the beginning. Otherwise, it's just rhetoric.
Yeah, and I think that is a big problem, and I think that's something that marketing wise, all the social media platforms will stamp out. I think when it becomes nonsense, because there's going to be so much content now that comes from AI, where lots of people are just lazy with it and just generate content for the sake of content and push it out, and it's just really generic and stuff. And I think they'll start, pushing that content to the bottom of the algorithm and not showing that to people ultimately, and rewarding the good content. And I think that will continue. They already flag stuff, don't they, that is created by AI.
There's a couple of pieces that I would say we're needing to really be paying close attention to. One is there a moral compass? Do we have ethical standards? And we've watched this in journalism today, where the reality is most people don't understand that there's 12 tenets to journalism, right? Is we're just producing content without understanding the responsibility as a journalist. And journalists today really need to have a disclaimer to say this is speculation, this is opinion, this is perspective, it's not news, right? They're not following those tenets. And so we can take that one step further and say, is it morally responsible or are you doing what's modeled and permissible? So I would say that's an area for improvement that we can use some elders to help us put some framework and guidelines around it. Second is we can also look at in many sports industries the responsibility of being paid for your talent, being paid for your likeness. So in the United States, university athletes now are paid for going into games, going into marketing and advertising. And that was always illegal. And so we have um, a really interesting situation where people are gladly, and I would say the European Union and the UK are doing this far better than the US. You guys are leading, and that is you have to ask for my permission to market to me. That I have to opt in is the default, not the exception. If and we just give away, we don't trust our government, and we're like, oh, I don't trust the government, but yet we give away our privacy all day long to corporations that are that metadata. They're selling the crap out of our information of who we are. Well, what do you think AI is doing? You're giving away your intellectual property without any concern, which is why we have feelings about, oh, here's how I feel about the culture of Apple versus Google versus Microsoft, right? As people have opinions about the evilness of a company or the likability of a company. Well, I use Microsoft's Copilot for Business, which is ChatGPT on the back end. Why do I do that? Because it silos and says, here's all of your IP, here's all of your personal content, And we are not going to feed the machine and give away all of your hard-earned effort and train it. So it silos and says, yours stays yours. And if it goes in, maybe we should be getting paid for that. Maybe not. I don't know. But I say that's the second evolution of where we need to come to some understanding about AI. And then the third is really how we learn how to use it. The quality of question determines the quality of answer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't even think of it that way, but ultimately, it is a bank of knowledge, isn't it? I mean, it can search the internet and stuff as well now. The ChatGPT can it, but it's ultimately a bank of knowledge, and the more knowledge that we put into it, the more knowledge it builds up. So we are kind of also building that machine, aren't we?
Well, like you said, when we look at marketing, if you pay for a product and it doesn't deliver, you're going to say it's like going to a hotel, Aaron, and saying, "Hey, I paid this many pounds in order to stay at the hotel, and the bed sheets were not clean, and there was lipstick on the glasses in there." You'd say, "Hey, mate, this isn't okay. I need a refund." But we're allowing somebody else to come in and take our knowledge, the way that we stitch together, a puzzle, and say, "Hey, Aaron, this is my content. This is kind of my unique perspective. Why don't you just go in and take that and sell it, and you make money, but don't give me a piece of it?" That's not okay. We saw this in the music industry. We know this in the film industry. So I see this is going to be something that has to be addressed in how do we get compensated. And I would say ultimately what I would perceive is we will have to explicitly, and this is where cryptocurrency will probably come in, is we will have to explicitly say, here's my marketplace of all my content. And if you want to leverage it for news, or you want to leverage it for a podcast, or you want to leverage it for an article, you're going to pay a royalty fee, just like the music industry says. How many times you play my song, I get a piece of that.
Yeah, well, the same exists for images and videos, doesn't it? You have, you can sell stock images and get a piece of that, and it happens in every other area. So it is surprising that it doesn't happen. But I suppose it's relatively new, so people haven't quite
Yeah,
come to that conclusion yet, I guess.
it's as we would say, it's the wild, wild west still. We're still pioneering it. And with that is always the temptation of gluttony, always the temptation of morality and where it's applied and where it's ignored. And I would say I have the faith. We can look historically to say we find our way through, sometimes with some bypasses and some crashes along the way. But ultimately, we find our way back to the humanness of what we're great at.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, I think if competition came in for ChatGPT with something that could, deliver on that scale and started paying people, I think you'd see a massive shift in people going to that other platform.
Well, of course, we have monopoly laws, and the more that you feed the machine, the more that it can pull apart. And so this becomes the question of morality around all of this, and that is, the more and more we use it, the more and more it learns, and we teach it, and it gets more powerful. So once you make a certain amount of money, X number of billions of pounds in your bank account, it doesn't matter when somebody starts, there's no way they're ever going to catch up to you. And so that may be something that, and I'm not big on legislation. I'm for small government and letting private market competition determine. But there does come a point where we say, hey, you're so far ahead and you're using this to squash the competition. We're going to need to make some adjustments. And that's where an oligarchy is an example, where we have elders with wisdom can come in and say, we need to make space for competition to catch up so that competition benefits the consumer versus just saying, well, free capital. And a lot of people in the United States and in the world don't realize the United States was given capitalism by the Dutch. We're given democracy by the French. Capitalism today is a far cry from what the Dutch gave us in its origin. And so it's time for us to make some tweaks and maybe go back to some of the purity and realize hey, maybe ChatGPT needs some healthy competition, and we need to take some of that and feed it to the other so that we as a consumer are served in benefit.
Yeah, and
We're
I
not
do
there yet.
worry about monopolies and stuff. However, you probably know a lot more about this than me, Chad. But I would question the legislation whether or not it's effective, because you just gotta look at Amazon. I mean, they dominated the market, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at legislation, this is really a primary example. As an elected official, I left in year 9 out of 10 years that I had terms, and I could have continued to run and been an elected official. But the core premise of it, Aaron, was when we look at the organization chart of an elected official, is the elected official is here at the bottom. The people are at the top. And when we actually flip that, and elected official starts thinking that they're at the top, that they're the king, right? That they're the dominant, and that the people are subjected to them, they're the subjects. It's time for that elected official to move on, right? They're there to serve the voice of the people, not to be the voice and subjectify the people. So when we look at the original intent of legislation and elected officials in the United States as an example, it was a part-time job. It was literally only 4 months of the year. Why? Because those elected officials had farms. It was an agricultural society, and they had to go plant the crop, then they had to go harvest the crop, and there was a small window where they could go off of the farm, serve the public, serve the larger community, and then get back to their primary business. Today, being an elected official is a business, and it shouldn't be. We should have people in there saying, you got 4 months to knock this crap out. And I bet you that we'd have far better legislation than the volume of crap that's being pumped out there. So I'm not a fan of having people in there full time. It should be a part time gig. I mean, look at that in the United States right now. Like him or hate him, Trump is a business person. And there's a reason why people said that's what our country needs. It's got nothing to do. We're not talking about the character of the person, which we could talk about. We're looking at the ability to say he runs it and understands it like a business. He's bringing in billionaires to say, our government has got too much fat and we need to trim all that fat. The thing that those that support that agenda, support that philosophy, don't get, I don't think that they get, is that is going to hurt. So great, you voted in change, you voted in to make the hard choices. Don't make the mistake that you're not going to be, on a diet, that things are going to be cut back and everybody's going to participate.
Yeah, if you're gonna make things lean, it gets lean for everyone, right?
That's it. That's right. So
Yeah.
if we do that in a limited, you got 4 months, whatever 3 months, 5 months, whatever that is. But the folks that we entrust to creating the frameworks and the guidelines for our democracies, or whatever form of government you have, they should have to have a full-time other gig. It should be a sacrifice. It should be limited. It should be, we have to be really precise because we have to get back to what we do for a full-time basis.
I couldn't agree more, to be honest. And I think having career politicians is not the way forward, because then they're actually isolating themselves from general society and what's actually going on. And yet, speaking for society, it seems counterintuitive to me. And I think that's why people buy into Trump, is because he's a businessman first. He's not a career politician. He doesn't speak like a career politician, And I think that's refreshing to people, and people want that.
Yeah, and when we do that, we move from being, a self-serving, this is a full-time, I have to stay elected, to a servant leading. I'm actually looking for what's best for the people that hired me, and I have a responsibility to then also maintain my business and my content.
Yeah, and by doing that and maintaining your own business and your own life, you're going to have many more interactions with people that are genuine interactions, not from a trying to get your vote perspective. You're going to have general life interactions with people and get proper opinion, rather than just arguably some yes men around you kind of pushing you in the direction they want to push you.
Yeah, I mean, we can use the example because I'm a business owner, because I have a foundation and been doing that for nearly 20 years. Somebody that understands. I mean, I remember in years ago. What was that? 8 years ago when he was running and was elected the first time. And the news that said they got all upset because he said, because they were ripping on him for not paying full taxes. And he goes, I'm a business person. Why should I pay a dime more than I have to? If you don't want me to pay those taxes, close the loopholes. That's a mindset of an entrepreneur that says, let me choose where I'm going to pay or be able to put my discretionary income and my profits. Don't tell me that you're going to take it and waste it. That's the mindset of somebody who understands the challenges I have, that understands the challenges of a business, instead of saying, oh, well, you have more than enough, so I'm going to take. But you're not a good steward of what you're taking. And so when we have somebody that is in the field next to us and understands what that crop is, how to weed it, how to water it, how to harvest it, what's the best crop to take to the market that's going to get the best sale, that's the person that we want in there helping create the legislation, because they understand what smart legislation versus just volume of legislation would be.
Yeah, and arguably when you've learned to do that, because I think people get confused when people are using these loopholes and reducing the amount of tax they have to pay, and they confuse that with tax evasion. They're two different things. Tax evasion is avoiding paying tax illegally, whereas using what's there, the legislation, and being smart and clever with money and what you're doing is a different ballgame, right?
Well, look at what the UK did. The UK looked at it and it was painful and it was really ugly for us to watch you guys go through that process, right? But the UK said, hey, this isn't working for us to be attached to the EU anymore. We're going to go off and we're going to be a partner, but we're not going to be married anymore, right? That was a painful process, but it's one that said we have a responsibility to our people first, and then we have a partnership that we'd like to have a relationship with you that's healthy, but it's no longer healthy. And so that was a very courageous, we can go all the way back to Hawkins of, are we going to use force or are we going to generate and empower? The tipping point is, do we have the courage to make the difficult decisions and then take action to follow through?
Yeah, I don't think it was handled particularly well, that whole process, to be
I think
honest.
it
It
was
took
handled
so long.
really poorly. I think we could all agree that it was ugly, but it did ultimately get you guys to move forward. It's still in the process of morphing, and sometimes it is ugly. Sometimes it is hard to look at, but sometimes we have to move forward despite not having it perfect.
Yeah, the disappointing thing for me was the way it came about. Sorry, my dog is going nuts in the background. I don't know if you can hear him. Somebody rang the doorbell, so he's having a moment. But yeah, I think for me, the way it happened, the way that obviously we had the turmoil with the leadership thereafter. So we went through about three prime ministers. The prime minister resigned because he was on the Remain side and he lost the battle, which was disappointing. Really, I kind of see why he resigned, but also at the same time, I would like him to have just continued and gone, okay, we've lost that one, but we will move forward, because it's okay to go with, with the majority, to change and to continue to move forward. Because I think he was probably at the time best placed to lead the country, especially in that moment of change and turmoil.
Well, we can look at what are some examples, and you guys have a great example of Winston Churchill, right? And this is closing the loop, coming all the way full circle back to the beginning. And that is, they had a great understanding of maybe the plan and what content, what needed to change, that there was time for a change. They didn't understand that they had to sell it. They had to market it. And that was where their ability. Winston Churchill was not a polished diplomat, and yet he was. So we can use the examples of Winston Churchill as, in order for him to navigate and handle some of the harder aspects, some of the things that pissed him off, some of the things that created indigestion, he understood that he needed to then, outside of the public eye, outside of the legislative eye, he went and painted. He went and had a pit stop, and he went and recharged his batteries by connecting with nature and finding his center. So that when he went back in, he was unapologetic. And I learned this from being in the Marine Corps. And I tell my clients is, look, I am, because of my background as an elected official and as a former Marine, I am relentlessly committed on the outcome. So if you see me being direct, you see me being hard, understand I am hard on the outcome, not on the person. Often, people that are absolutely committed to the outcome, they have a gregariousness, they have a diplomacy that can be a bit rough on the edges, but they understand there is an empathy and compassion for the people, even though sometimes it is hard to see. Is he was so determined that he understood that the marketing was non-traditional because it was lives that were on the line, and that he was so clear on the outcome, he was unapologetic on the path to get there. It was a different marketing plan that ultimately caused him, to be ejected later, then being asked to come back because of Chamberlain being very soft against the Nazis. And once Churchill completed and succeeded in the war, they said, "You're out of here again." He was the man for the job at the time, right? But we have to understand, does this leader, are they a fascist dictator leader that comes over top? Or do they come alongside of the people like Jesus, like Gandhi, like Nelson Mandela, right? Is they come alongside, but they do not apologize. They are strong. Jesus didn't die because people liked him. Nelson Mandela wasn't incarcerated for 25 years because people liked him. Gandhi didn't, go on starvation protest because the colonists liked him. They're so committed that they understood that they come alongside, and that inspires and rallies the people. And that was why you guys went through a number of PMs like it was tissue.
Yeah, and I think that's so right. That's overlooked, I think, with the stuff you're saying about Nelson Mandela and Gandhi and stuff like that. Ultimately, people have this rose-tinted view now that they were just always beloved and these amazing people. Actually, they came up, they weren't beloved at the time, and they went through real difficult times and challenges. And that's why they are so beloved now, because hindsight, looking back, we can see the sacrifice and the effort that they made, and that they stuck to their convictions despite all these hardships and despite the fact that the majority was against them.
Yeah, I mean, we have a great coach in our country historically for football, right? And we're not going to get into what proper football is versus whatever why we call it what we do. Okay, it's another conversation. But there was a coach called Lou Holt, and he said defense is what you see when you take your eyes off the goal line. And the examples that we gave are people that don't focus on the distraction. They don't focus on the defense because they're so committed to scoring the goal, to putting it in the back of the net in proper football, right? Is that they are not in this was something that was very different in this last election for the United States, is we saw a very different Donald Trump. And that was one that was unapologetic, but not as aggressive because he was so committed on here's where I'm going that he didn't allow the questions and the distraction to take him off addressing that. He's like, look, here's where I'm going. This is what I'm going to talk about. The other side was so focused on being popular and being likable that there was no depth to the credibility behind that message. So when we have a leader, it may take quite a bit of time before we see the wisdom in the courageous decisions and conversations that are required. They're not worried about whether they're liked. They're worried about whether they actually create the intended impact.
Yeah, and there's the answer, really, isn't it? There's a lot of politicians, and that's why he stands out so much. There's a lot of politicians that do everything they can to be liked by everybody, and it's just not possible. Especially when you're talking about this, running a country and the amount of diverse issues that are involved there. There's absolutely no way you're going to keep everybody happy.
You're not going to keep everybody happy, and that's about really, if you want to step in as a business owner, you want to be an elected official, you want to be in a position of leadership, you got to get good first with you. You have to have a really resilient self-esteem, level of self-confidence, a level of self-discipline. And that is about saying that my standards are the marker, not society's, because society has a low bar. So we have to be able to say my standards are defined by between me and the big man above, right? That's the only person that is judging me, because you can be in a position of leadership, and I guarantee you could be making exactly 100% the right decision, Aaron, and you won't. But let's say it's absolutely the right decision. You will have naysayers. You will have people judge you. It's the nature that goes, it's part of the pain, which is an ingredient to success. The story about the pain is what creates suffering. So drop the stories. And that's what great leaders do is they negate and they ignore the stories that create suffering, that cause hesitation, that cause us to go to, am I popular? Am I going to be liked? And they understand pain is part of the process. And they know that that pain is going to be fuel for being able to create impact. And they don't allow other people's opinion to hesitate in being able to make the right decisions and taking actions behind those. It's one of the rarest qualities. Courage is, in my experience, the most rare quality in elected positions today.
Yeah, I'd agree. I find a lot of them very flaky and kind of non-committal, and they kind of sit on the fence all the time. Whereas I think what people want from not just politicians but from leaders in general is somebody who understands their why, their core values, and what they stand for, and to commit to them and to have some conviction. I think that's what people want.
We can look at intimate relationships, let's say in marriage, right? And in a marriage in general, right? So this is generalized. There's always exceptions in there. But when we look at the female in a traditional marriage, if you were told you get only one of two options, you have to choose one, love or respect. Hands down, women are going to choose love over respect. Hands down, men are going to say want respect over love. When we look at leadership, be that a CEO, be that in a private corporation, be that a foundation, be that an elected official, if they need to lead, they need to be respected over being loved. If they compromise that respect, which is popularity, which is being liked, all of those kind of things, that's about being, love, then they will not do the difficult decisions that serve the people, that serve the, and when we look at that in capitalism, what do we see? The leaders that are like, well, we got to serve the stockholders and the profit. No, that is not the right capitalism. We have a responsibility to, yes, serve our stockholders, serve our employees, and serve our customer. And we've lost our way, which is why unions are on the increase again, because we are doing things that are just profit-based only, without the moral and ethical responsibility of doing what's right for our client and doing what's right for our employees.
Yeah, is that due to the systems that we run, though, potentially? Because it's very short-term thinking, isn't it? And I suppose, all these CEOs, they don't. I say all again. I'm generalizing, but they don't commit to the long-term picture because they're just worried about that next earnings announcement to keep their job, to hit their bonus, and we're kind of incentivizing it to a degree, aren't we?
Yeah, we've gotten to a point of gluttony and said that profitability is the only marker of success. Well, really, is that the only marker to a intimate relationship? Is that the only marker to your faith-based relationship? To your physical health relationship? No. The things that actually matter are the intangibles. And that is how we make people feel. And we can do that in a way that makes a profit, that we don't have to apologize for making a profit, but we can't do that at the expense of dissolving, diminishing, and paying the lowest denominator. Because of the internet and because we are now a global society, we don't think about, when we say, I can afford a virtual assistant and I'm going to hire one in a developing part of the world for $10 an hour. Why? Because in my home country, maybe, that would cost 30 or 40 pounds an hour. So I'm going to go get 4 times that. But what is the societal impact of that person at $10? And of course, the illusion is, well, I'm giving them financial stability. But what's the long-term impact of that? What's the ethical impact of that? It's also keeping them down at that level. And so we have to have a balance. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. What I'm saying is this is a relationship. And while we can do that to incentivize and begin, what we also need to do is keep an eye on it to morph it and adjust it to say, I don't apologize for being profitable, but I have to be morally ethical in the journey as well.
Yeah, and if we're morally ethical, then surely, I mean, I'm just surmising, but surely they'll be better for our longevity, and will, rather than just focus on short-term profits, we'll be able to have profits consistently over a period of time and grow in the right direction.
I found that it's actually quite simple. And I think it was Confucius said, life is really easy, but we insist on making it difficult. No, life is very simple, but we insist on making it complex. So to keep it simple, fill your cup. So if we were to take a teacup with a saucer, which you never see anymore, right? But we had a traditional teacup with a saucer or coffee, whatever you want to put in there. I'm going to put scotch in mine. But we want to fill it, maybe not the scotch. Okay. We're going to fill it to overflowing because that's a lot of scotch. I got to work, right? I'm getting totally off the point here. So we have some tea. Fill the cup to overflowing. And whatever goes into the saucer, give forward. And so the formula to success, Aaron, is produce so much that if we look at this from an agricultural, is have what's called a bumper crop. You overproduced what you're expecting and give that to those in need. Because the other way around is we typically say, once I have enough, then I'll give to others. Well, you're never going to have enough. Rockefeller, one of the first richest men in the world, when they interviewed him and said, how much is enough? His answer was just a little bit more. And so the formula for entrepreneurial success is overproduce so that you know that you scored the goal. You are scoring goal after goal after goal and give the extra forward. That's how we lift others up morally. That's how we move them out of poverty and survival while we succeed. It's a relationship of give and take. But if it's just take, that is not what capitalism, that's not what democracy, it's not what our morality was ever designed to be. It's the
Yeah,
temptation. It's the temptation.
yeah, and you're definitely right. This is I see it all the time with people. It's never enough. It's never enough.
Yeah,
And I think if that is your goal to continue chasing, you'll never get there.
agree. So if we look at the responsibility of serving while we're serving ourselves, as a business person, I say, I make no apologies. The more money I generate, the larger checks I can write and the impact I can create in helping others. But the best way to help the poor is to not be poor ourselves. The best way to help the poor is also stop feeding them fish and teach them how to fish.
Absolutely. I think my dog's having another mad moment. No, you're definitely right, but it is that teaching people how to fish. It's not about necessarily handouts. It's about setting people up to succeed for themselves, right?
It is. And, I've had the conversation of people then feeling judged or feeling that it's wrong that, look, if your ability is to write a check and that's your way of contributing, great, then you're contributing and helping because they do need some fish. But at some point, we need to transition providing the fish to being able to teach them how to fish. And to teach them how to fish means that we have to buy the gear and then we have to take the time to teach them the process, to teach them the skill set, right? And not everybody has an interest. Not everybody's called to do that. Not everybody has the time to be able to invest to do that for people. But there are people that can, right? So when we do that, it's amazing as well. We have especially in your country, there's an all-time high in proper London. I don't know if you know this statistic that if a male die, a healthy male that is not elderly, if they die, you know that it is expected that that is the cause of death was suicide. It's the expected cause of death. Why? because we're so consumed today with social media. It is really bad for us consuming it, right? That what we don't realize is it's all about me, me, me. When I am happy, then I can go serve other people. And what we need to realize is the best way to get out of a depression is go serve another person, go serve others. Because we get out of, I don't have enough. And what we get is perspective of, holy crap, they have nothing. And it allows us to go, maybe I don't have enough, but holy crap, I'm blessed. I have more than I was giving credit for. And so it changes our perspective. When we serve other people, we actually are served, and our mental health skyrockets because we have gratitude, we have perspective, and we realize that we are rich beyond belief.
Absolutely, that's definitely true, and I would also add there that it also boosts your self-esteem as well, helping some people, and seeing the difference you can make to someone's life actually really helps your self-esteem and boosts how you feel about yourself and how you perceive yourself, because that's part of it as well. We get so locked in this selfish kind of hamster wheel almost, where we just kind of running in place. We just get consumed by all these other things on the internet, like other people's lives are so much better than ours. This is better than ours. You start to feel crap about yourself. You feel like you've not accomplished anything. You've not done anything. And then if you help somebody, actually, that you get a sense of achievement, a massive sense of achievement that you I don't think you can get from doing stuff for yourself.
It goes back, I think, to the opening premise, and that was from a gentleman that was extremely successful in the financial industry as an advisor. And he said it's not our strength that holds us to our purpose. It's the strength of the purpose itself. We need to know when we get up and we get out of bed that there's something inspiring us and giving us a purpose that is calling us to go make a difference. And we saw what the impact of COVID was over 2 years, where people were isolated and they didn't realize how isolated they were, where people realized they didn't have a purpose. And so there was a huge amount of depression. But when we go and serve other people, it gives us a sense of purpose, a why. And that's what allows us to get out of our head and go serve other people. And we, in turn, get a gift. They, in turn, get a gift.
Yeah, I agree, and I think as well, and this is something that I've always looked at, is when people get elderly, they retire, and they have nothing, they don't do anything, or they don't have any purpose. They tend to die, or at least, at very least, deteriorate to a point where they're not mentally or physically able to do much a lot quicker than those that stay active or continue with a purpose and have something to focus on.
This is one of the principles and one of the gifts that I learned in working with billionaires, working with professional athletes, working with Olympians, is there's a direct correlation to people who are retiring from their career. Okay. And that is the human condition cannot handle an empty void. It has to fill it. And so we don't recognize that when we retire, there's a death. It is a death of an identity, right? Our career, our profession is often associated with an identity. This is who I am. And when you can look at a billionaire, when they achieve their financial empire, morally and spiritually, they're often absent, and that is bankrupt. And so their personal relationships with their marriage, their kids, their spirit has not been nurtured. There was no relationship because they put all of their energy and focus over here. So the Dalai Lama said the thing that most surprised him about mankind was that they spend down their health in order to gain an empire. And then they spend down their empire in order to restore their health. So when we have a void, we don't recognize this is our identity as in our career is coming to an end. We need to begin the mourning process, the 7 steps of grief. But what we can also do is start creating a new identity before this one expires. That's how we avoid the cancer, the depression. In when we have a void and we don't have something healthy to put in, we will put unhealthy things in that void to fill it because it can't handle emptiness. So we will put in significance, even if it is at the expense of our health. so that we can be significant. Look at me. I'm now ill. Please pay attention. Keep the spotlight on me, right? But we can do that in healthy ways by saying, how do I grow before I finish the race? I tell people when they want to run a marathon, schedule the next race and register it before the gun goes off for this one. So that when you cross the finish line, you have the next thing to get you out of bed. It's that simple. What is the next thing that inspires you, gives you a sense of purpose that gets you out of bed every day? When I get up every day, my feet hit the ground, I want to hear the devil say, shit, he's up.
Yes. It's definitely important. And I've had occasions or periods in my life where I've probably lost purpose. Something's gone wrong, or I've been in a position in my life where,
We chase this
things.
shiny object. We all,
Yeah, you get some doom and gloom, like a failed business attempt, for instance, that I had, and it leaves you quite depressed and feel like you have no purpose, nowhere to turn, what you're going to do, and that's probably the most difficult time of my life, really, feeling that way, not knowing what to do with your life. Like I say, having a purpose, you become a different person. You're a completely different person when you've got a purpose, energy wise, and what you bring to life, how you feel about yourself. It's just a dramatic change.
yes. And there's another component that really trips us up in that, Aaron, and that is we can clearly know our purpose, but do we have the courage to pivot and pursue it, to take action, make decisions, and act on that purpose? What holds us back is we go, oh, but Chad, you don't understand. I got to, pay my bills. Oh, but you don't understand. My child's university tuition is going to be coming up in 5 years. You don't understand why I don't have the courage or the ability to actually pursue this purpose. So what happens is between the gap of knowing our purpose and our ability to actually go after it, depression is caused by our inability to accept our emotions. Depression is a denial of emotions, right? And so we look at that and say, this is the excuse. In reality, it's the explanation. What is the gap in between is the ability of courage and to get resourceful. It's not a lack of resource, it's a lack of resourcefulness to close the gap from here to here and then do this. So the resourcefulness is what's standing in the way. And it requires us to say, this is no longer an excuse, it's an explanation. And I'm going to take the courage to get resourceful and take action. This 2024, hands down, the most difficult year of my entire life. I know what my purpose is, and everything has had to be removed. I've had to create an entirely new identity in order for me to embrace and unfold and begin delivering on that purpose. The question is it worth it? The question is, do you have the courage to go after it? Because you're so clear, it's not a want, it's a must. And we need to understand pain is one of the ingredients to anything that is worth achieving. It's kind of like a great cookie. Let's make it the ratio of salt and not sugar or flour. But if you don't accept and have the courage to get comfortable being uncomfortable, you're never going to grow your comfort zone. You're never going to have the courage to actually activate and take action on your purpose. Now, we can do that and pivot, and then we can see how much time do we have, and hopefully we can do that gracefully. But for so many people, the depression is they know what they're supposed to be doing, and they're not doing it. It's the denial of our emotions that creates that depression.
And I think, ultimately, I'll give this podcast as an example, right? I wanted to start a podcast in 2018. I did 2 episodes, and then it was difficult setting it up, getting guests and getting things to where I wanted it to be. So I quit and started back in 2024. But ultimately, it took some things in my life to give me a kick up the arse, really, to get to the point where I'm like, right, I'm going to do it unapologetically, no matter what. Because initially, when I started in 2018, I was worried about what everybody else would think. Even though this is what I wanted to do, I was worried about what everybody else would think. I was worried about failing. So then, rather than fail, and I've done this a lot in my life, rather than fail, it's easier to make up an excuse sometimes. So then you never put yourself out there to fail. I do not think that's the right thing to do by any stretch, but that's what I did for a
We
long
all
time, and
do
I
it.
was afraid to do it. And it's easier in it to have a, oh, I'm too busy, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But internally, that never goes away. That feeling that you're
Yeah.
not pursuing what you want to pursue.
So there's three pieces here for our audience to be able to say, okay, how do I actually close the gap? Well, one, King Solomon, I believe, said, when an honest man realizes he is mistaken, he'll either cease being honest or cease being mistaken. Okay. So the first is step one is, are we willing to get honest? Or are we going to deny it? Are we going to cease being mistaken? Nope, it wasn't my fault. I'm a victim, which means that we have to have a villain, which means that we can't be victorious and a victim simultaneously. They're not compatible. Then it's not possible. You have to drop the victim card. It's not anybody else's fault. I'm not a victim. And we have to be willing to say, I'm mistaken. It's time for me to get honest. Okay, that's step one. The second piece in closing that gap is we have to have a sense of hope. And hope is almost impossible to achieve unless we are inspired to believe that there's a path, that it's actually possible to achieve it, Aaron. So you had to believe it was actually possible to be successful as a podcaster. So hope requires that we believe it's possible. And second, that we believe there's a path to actually getting there, which brings in the third ingredient. If we don't know, I think about when I went through boot camp in the Marine Corps. I didn't know what to do. There was times I would have easily probably given up. But what it allowed me to realize is, with a drill instructor, with people who were experts who knew how to create a Marine, maybe we need a mentor. Maybe we need a coach. Maybe we need a therapist, somebody that can help us, that knows the path, has got the map, they know how to navigate it, and they know how to allow us to score and succeed. So we aren't designed to be by ourselves. We need to be honest. We need to have hope that it's possible and that there's a path to get there. And we might need to get resourceful to say, how do I forward? How do I bring somebody in to show me the way?
Yeah, and I think as well, Chad, on your last point, so when lots of people start businesses, especially nowadays with internet, there's a lot of solopreneurs out there, a lot of people who start by themselves, a lot of people who don't have a support structure or people who are interested to join them, etc. So, the the solution to that is to find somebody, a coach, to pay somebody. And I'm all for that. And I think that is the way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a coach. It might be somebody who does a different aspect of the business that you bring in potentially. Like, I pay for a videographer, for instance, to do stuff. And, I bounce ideas off them. And, it's having other people. And at the start, you may have to pay people to do that, if you can't find somebody to work with. And I think it is crucial, though, because if we don't have it, it's not only the support when things are going wrong, but it's actually somebody to bounce ideas off when things are going right, and to just challenge your thinking sometimes, because otherwise you get in this little echo chamber of your own, and you just, nobody's challenging you to grow. So unless you have the mindset already where you can constantly critically analyze what you're doing and be detached from it and remove the emotion, then you need another voice, really.
Spot on. I mean, that full stop is to understand it's not a lack of resource. It's a lack of resourcefulness. And that resource could be hiring somebody, could be a piece of technology. It could be joining a community. It could be asking for a grant to be able to do that. It might be a person, but it requires us to humble ourselves to say, I don't know, but I do know somebody who does. It allows ourselves to humble ourselves and say, I need help.
And that in itself takes courage, right?
I mean, our ego says, no, I'm the king. I am, God. If we really look at our ego, Our ego wants to deny that there's something greater than us. Why? Because it feels threatened. It feels like, well, if I'm not all that there is, then what is there? So asking for help is a humbling experience to be able to say, I don't know. I mean, when I was in boot camp, I got the flu, right? Not the time that you want to get sick. And it was coming out both ends, not to get graphic about it, right? But in boot camp, you had to ask permission. You couldn't just go use the bathroom. And so they said, okay, you need to drop and start doing push-ups. Now, you weren't allowed to have any watches or things to keep track of time intentionally. And I just did push-up after push-up. And somebody was keeping time and later said that I was there. Now, if we think about this, you're sick. If you're in good shape, most people can probably do push-ups for 5 minutes maximum. I did push-ups for 45 minutes, which tells you that our bodies are capable of 20 times more than our mind or ego wants to be able to acknowledge. Because as soon as our ego says, ooh, that's pain, it wants to back off. But what we're capable of, what our potential versus our capacity are two very different things. And often that's why we need to humble ourselves and bring somebody in that says, keep going. But when you look at, I had the fortunate privilege of, for a charity, going through Navy SEAL Bud School at like 43 years old. The passing rate for Hell Week is like 28% for 18-year-olds. And I was like 43 years old, okay? And one of the first things you have to do, I actually tore my hip ligament and had to have surgery, so I wasn't able to do it, but I led a team of coaches through it. So just to be clear, the first thing that you have to do is 1,000 push-ups, Aaron. Now, if you think 1,000 push-ups, you're never gonna win. You're never gonna succeed. So what's the trick? 100, 100, 100, 50, 25, to eventually you're going to get to one more. So the thing that successful people, high performers understand is an old African proverb. Walk as far as you can see, and when you get there, you'll be able to see further. One more step, one more push-up, one more milestone. But we have to have a clear understanding of our purpose. What is causing us to stay the course despite the pain in the journey? That's how winning is done.
Absolutely. And I think we underestimate the mind's propensity for comfort and safety, don't we? Because ultimately that's what it's designed for. We've evolved to keep ourselves safe, and we have all this extra ability, but we store that up for emergencies essentially, and that, like, we'll only access that in emergencies. We'll try and preserve ourselves as long as we can. We'll try and store food as fat, and try and just look after ourselves so that we got the best chance to survive if something goes wrong, if the worst becomes the worst. So we kind of have to actively overcome that, because that's our natural state, right? Our natural state is to seek comfort, to sit on the sofa with a blanket and some snacks and watch TV, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality is what we store rots, right? We know this from scripture. We know this from nature, is that, yeah, there's a little bit of storage that squirrels will store for the winter. Bears will put on enough fat to weather the winter, and they lower their metabolism. So there's a little bit of, look, we do need to preserve and store, but for the most part, it actually makes us weak. And we have a weird relationship with physical strength. We actually have to go exert energy in order to generate energy. Business is no different. We have to go and exert ourselves in order to produce. And we have to have that healthy relationship in that. And one of the ingredients is going to be pain. Suffering are the stories about the pain. And so we don't need to worry about store to a point of gluttony. To a point of responsibility, yes. But our mind is going to tell us, ouch, this hurts, back off. Which is why we have to have a purpose much greater. For 20 years, I think it's been that I've gone down to Central America where we have a compound. We build houses for widowed women with children. Now, my stomach does not have a strong immune system. I don't produce enough acid, so I tend to get Montezuma. very easily in developing parts of the world. And I get sick to the point of almost being hospitalized a couple of times, almost died. People are like, why on earth would you keep going back if it's such a miserable and difficult experience? And because I know my purpose, I said, because it allows me to get uncomfortable, which allows me to realize how blessed I am for all the things that I have in my life. It's perspective. We have to get uncomfortable to appreciate the things that we have. And we have to have a reason bigger than ourselves in order to stay the course.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more, and I think that's so important. Is getting that understanding. And have you read Simon Sinek's book, Finding Your Why?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good starting point for people to kind of get a bit of an understanding of the concept. I
Simon,
think there's probably plenty out there now, anyway, isn't there?
so there's four authors I would say, let's bring them in here in four pieces. One is Simon Sinek's Finding Your Why is really important. J.K. Rowling, most successful author in history outside of the Bible's bestseller over time, I guess. But a lot of people don't realize she wrote Harry Potter with the end first and then wrote it backwards. If we know the finish line, Simon Sinek is saying, if you know your purpose, you can write the narrative backwards. It's a lot easier. Okay. So there's two authors that have some sage wisdom. Then we can bring in and look at in that process two other authors. One is James Clear. I'm going to come back to, but the other one I'm trying to think of the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. Okay, not giving a fuck is what the book says. Okay, and he says not giving a fuck isn't about this cool surfer dude just not caring about anything in the world. It's actually about being very precise in knowing what you do care about and ignoring the rest. So Cynic, J.K. Rowling, and John, I can't remember his name, but excellent book. Okay. Then
Yeah, I've got the book somewhere. I can't remember his name, to be honest.
Yeah, and he's actually got, I think he's out on Netflix, is like the concise version is really good. But it's saying, what do I care about? And going after that. And then we can bring in James Clear, Atomic Habits of one more push-up. It's little incremental steps that allow us to persist. And as one of our former presidents, Coolidge, said, persistence and consistency are omnipotent. So let's say you have a purpose, you have all that clarity. If you aren't taking persistent and consistent action, going to the gym and a little bit increase, we have to have micro tears of the muscle to build strength. You keep doing the same weight, the same reps, and the same duration, you're not going to build muscle. You might maintain it, but it probably will atrophy. We have to have micro tears. A little bit of discomfort, a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of discomfort is what grows our comfort zone. So diving into a podcast in 2018 and being like, I'm all in, is kind of like going to the gym and saying, I'm going to work out 1 day a week, 4 hours, lifting 400 kilos. No, you're not going to get results and you're just going to be exhausted and hurt. It's a really bad formula. But if you go 3 days a week and you do a little bit and increase a little bit and increase a little bit, that's how winning is done.
Progressive overload. That's the concept. Yeah, and I agree with it. We have to push ourselves not too far, but out of our comfort zone, small at the time, and then we adjust. Right, we adjust to that, and then we can keep moving forward, keep doing it, and then over time, I think I've stole this from somewhere. It's not mine, but I think we always overestimate what we can do in a short space of time and underestimate what we can do in a long period of time. And I think that's something that I've done this time around with my podcast. Is I know my why, I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and I'm just enjoying the process. I'm enjoying it step by step and I'm trying to stretch myself, but also I'm having fun doing it. So
Yeah, I'll say this, Aaron, is I have a separate calendar, and I'm a big fan of saying I don't know everything. In fact, a lot of people that will come on are like, "Oh, I got to have everything, perfectly mastered and rehearsed in my head." I show up and I'm present. But I also learn from my predecessors, whether they're dead and have left knowledge behind for me to learn and be a teacher, and I can be the student. I don't profess to have everything in my head. In fact, I have very little that makes sense in my head and more noise than wisdom. but I do have a repository of wisdom that I can just go in and type today with technology a keyword. So I just literally I have a calendar of quotes, and one of them I know pretty well, but I might get it wrong. So I just typed in Balboa. The movie, I think it was just called Balboa, one of Sylvester Stallone's Rocky movies. And he says this because we can bring in everything that we've talked about, but to stay persistent and consistent goes back to self-esteem and self-confidence have to be a part of it as well. And that is, which voice are we tuning into? And he says this, he says, and he's talking to his son, he says, let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you're hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth, but you got to be willing to take the hit and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you are because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. So there's a culmination here of we have to know our purpose. We have to have the courage to pursue it and take action consistently, persistently, little doses day by day. And we have to be able to remove the naysayers, the people that are judging. And I'll tell you, the people that do that the most, that actually stop us the most, are those that are most close to us, our family and our friends. Because they're like, Aaron, I know you. I've known you for decades. You aren't this enlightened person. Dude, I've seen the business mistakes you've made. Dude, you're not that. You're full of it. And we have to be willing to love them, but not allow them to interfere with us succeeding. So if you know what you're worth, you got to be willing to go after it and be willing to take the hits. Now, the other side of that is, he says it's a very mean and nasty place. It can be, but it's also a beautiful and wonderful and inspiring world as well. We have to choose which one we're going to feed and which one we're going to focus on. I don't choose to pay attention to the defense that's trying to stop me because my eyes are too busy focusing on making goals. And that means I'm really clear on my purpose and I don't take my eye off of the ball.
Yeah, it's really powerful, that, and ultimately it does cover everything, doesn't it? It covers accountability and all the key things, the courage and the fact that we are going to get hit in life, essentially, for want of a better term, and we got to keep going. What we decide to do at that point kind of really will set which direction our life goes from there, because we could give up at every first time we fall, the first hurdle. If we give up at every point, then we're going to be pretty miserable. Yeah, and ultimately, the family thing that you mentioned as well, and friends, that is right. And I've spoken about that on so many shows before, where people have this preconceived idea of who you are, and you fit in this pretty neat box that they understand who you are, what you do, what you're all about. And as soon as you start stepping out of that box, often it's not on purpose and it's not deliberate, but they're like, "Oh, what are you doing? No, that's not who you are," and they want to kind of push you back into that box so they feel safe with the knowledge of who you are as a person as well.
I'm so glad that you brought that point up, Aaron, because a much more powerful question is not who we are, but to ask ourselves, what am I? Because what am I goes to the question of our beingness. What I am is love, kindness, gentleness, patience, goodness. And what I am being can be and should be the leading piece in whatever it is I decide to be doing. But when we look at who am I, that goes to our identity. And our identities hopefully are going to morph. Hopefully we can go from being the caterpillar to the butterfly. But there's a crystallisis, there's a moment where we go into the cocoon and we have to take all of what was and use that as fuel in order for us to become the butterfly and fly away. So there's a beautiful metaphor, but it's also about understanding what I am. I'm not a butterfly. to be honest. I went from being a nymph to a dragonfly. And do you have the courage to be the butterfly or the dragonfly? To ignore everybody saying, you can't morph, you can't do the gestation and come out to become what you are. Well, the only way that we do that, Aaron, is to remember who we are being in the midst of that doing this. In order to stay persistent and consistent in podcasting, in order to do the 1,000 push-ups, in order to stay the course and build our business to success, we have to remind ourselves each and every day that we get up, who am I going to decide to be in the midst of whatever it is that I choose to do or have to do?
Absolutely. And I think over time, everybody changes. It's just whether or not we are deliberate about those changes and about who we want to be and which way we go, right? Because we'll change regardless. Life will inevitably affect us to the point where we will make changes, even if they're unconscious.
Well, you've heard that the old metaphor of change is inevitable, growth is optional. And usually it ends there. But we also have to understand the relationship of growth. Growth for the sake of growth is the entire nature and purpose of a cancer cell. So, what's the purpose? We have to also look at disciplined, intentional growth. So, it's not enough just to accept that change is part of life. We also have a responsibility to have disciplined, intentional growth. It's a balance between the two, because growth for the sake of growth can lead us onto detours and get us lost. It's also the entire purpose of a cancer cell.
Absolutely. And that's a really interesting way to think about it. I've never thought about it that way before. So it's yeah, it's quite intriguing. Chad, it's loved the conversation. Before we go anywhere, how can people find your book and get in touch with you, find more about you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So the book was, so the easy answer to that question, thank you for asking, Aaron. I keep it very simple. Just go to chadecooper.com, all one word, chadecooper.com, what you see under the name tag here. And that from there, you'll be able to find access to my books, two of which are free. There's micro books. The other one is the full book on how to master time instead of being a slave to it. But really, I'm hitting a point where I'm taking all of the wisdom, I'm taking the ingredients of high performers that are proven performers as well as my own, and my goal is to bring those out into the world in volume. And so it's really about get into a dialogue. For the first time in I think 18 or 19 years, I'm actually going to open the door to bring in the right new clients for coaching. So if you feel that coaching is something that you can benefit from, then just go on the website or send an email to Coach Cooper at chaddecooper.com. But if you're looking for help, just engage and I'll point you in the right direction, or look at, maybe we need to have a relationship to help you with. We'll find out what's actually best suit for you.
That's amazing. Thank you, Chad. Before we do kind of sign off, do you have any final thoughts or messages that you want to leave people with?
There's a beautiful scripture. I want to say it's Matthew 10, but I could be wrong. And I discovered this as an elected official. And it essentially goes like this: do not worry about what you'll say, for at that time the words will be given to you. For it will not be you speaking, but the words of God speaking through you. So my invitation for people is be present. It's compatible with the philosophy of Buddhism. Is we're so busy, Aaron, living in the past or the future that we're actually missing the opportunity to be present. And so the thing I really enjoyed about this conversation today, neither of us rehearsed or practiced. We just showed up and we were present. And I think it was a beautiful opportunity to share some gifts with people. And that's when we actually show up at our best. So just be present today, find the beauty in what's right, and know that there's something bigger than us that's guiding us along the way. But we got to listen to it, have the courage to actually follow it.
Chad, thank you ever so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
A pleasure. Thank you. Anytime.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks again for being part of this journey. Stay tuned. We've got even more great conversations coming your way.